Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Overwatch In Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be reviewing Torbjorn. Torbjorn Toblerone. I'm going to call him Torb for pretty much the rest of this episode to avoid any embarrassing mispronunciations. But he's the little troll that everybody loves to hate, placing turrets all over the map. And despite being considered by the community to be an easy, a simple, or a newbie character, he actually has an insanely busy kit and can be played at very high level if done properly. Today's episode is mostly going to focus on the statistics of Torbjorn because he has a busier kit than almost any character in the entire game, and I'll be doing a follow-up in-depth episode later on about how to place the turrets and best uses and sort of stuff like that. So let's jump straight into the stats with his base health. He has a base health of 200, which is a little bit lower than you think. Most people regard Torbjorn as being tankier, but that's probably because he often has 75 armor as well, giving him 275 total hit points. He's often got the 75 armor because of his passive. You will passively generate 2 scrap per second, and you can pick up 15 scrap per dead hero around the map. You see them in these little piles of gears. I will say that the pickup range on scrap is further than you think. You don't have to physically touch it like a health pack. As long as you get relatively close to it, it'll kind of like magnetically attract to you. And Torbjorn uses these scraps to drop armor packs. You spend 50 scrap and you throw down an armor pack. These armor packs give your team plus 75 armor per pickup. Unfortunately, they do not regenerate. It's not like Diva or Reinhardt or Winston, where when you heal them, they get the armor back. And there's no double pickups or triple pickups, so you can't get like 150 armor or anything crazy like that. You pick it up once, it's expendable, but Torbjorn almost always will have given himself an armor pack, and a great many of his teammates may also have armor, which can really throw off your 1v1 engagements. And I will say that giving your team armor is a super important part of Torbjorn. If you are not playing the support part of Torb and you are not supplying your team with extra health, you're doing it wrong, because that extra armor really can turn around a lot of team fights and allow your healers to survive things that they normally wouldn't have. Having Mercy with armor, ZENYATTA with armor, or even LUCIO with armor can be very awesome. So let's jump into the stats of his weapons. His primary gun is the Rivet Gun, or what I'm going to call the Rivet Gun primary. It'll deal 70 damage per projectile, and it has a rate of fire of 100 rounds per minute. I will say it's a projectile and not a hit scan. It has a travel time, so it doesn't work like Soldier or Tracer or Bastion. You actually have to lead some of these projectiles. It also has a very significant arc. At longer ranges, it will literally arc down and drip down toward the ground because it is a projectile. You're firing molten lead is what you're doing. However, it can headshot for double damage. That can mean that you can get up to 140 damage per shot with this weapon, nearly one-shotting Tracer. If you have a Mercy damage boost or if they have an orb on them, you can one-shot a lot of characters. It can be very, very powerful. However, I think his more powerful asset is his secondary weapon, his Rivet Gun secondary, or the Rivet Shotgun. The Rivet Shotgun will deal 15 damage per pellet up close and decrease down to 6 damage per pellet at its maximum range, and it fires 10 pellets per shot, so doing some easy math, you can tell that it could do up to 150 damage per shot up close. It fires slightly slower at 75 rounds per minute, so it'll be a little bit slower than the Rivet primary. However, unlike the primary, it does have a damage fall-off range. It'll start losing its maximum damage at around 7 meters. However, it can headshot for double damage. And I'm going to go ahead and let you know, the Rivet Shotgun slaughters tanks. It can do squishies as well, but typically you don't hit them with all of the pellets. But it can murder tanks, especially with that 300 damage headshot. It is just beyond brutal. If Winston gets in your face, you can basically two-shot him with this. You can two-shot most of the tanks. Very, very scary. You should absolutely respect a Torbjorn that wants to challenge you. You should not take him lightly. So yeah, the shotgun's the way to go. The Rivet primary I find to be more for spamming or for long-range kind of lucky shots. It's not quite as good as May's Icicle, but it's by no means bad. Unfortunately, the weapon does have a relatively slow reload time at 2 seconds. That is slow for this game, so it can put you out of the fight slightly. And I don't want you to forget the Forge Hammer. A lot of people like to forget about the Forge Hammer on Torbjorn, but it is extremely effective. So effective, as a matter of fact, it got nerfed recently. This little hammer will deal 55 damage per hit. That's significantly higher than the base melee. It actually used to be 75. They had to nerf it. and it will heal your turret for 50 hit points per hit, and you can swing it 75 times per minute. I guess if you wanted to give it an RPM, it would be 75 RPM, kind of like your shotgun. But this Forge Hammer can be downright dirty in the right situation. It's got a very generous hitbox, especially when you go Molten Core, which makes you swing faster, which we'll talk about later on. You can put out a lot of DPS, and when Ana nano boosts you, you could do even more. It can be very, very scary. Now let's talk about what makes Torbjorn Torbjorn, which is his turrets. He can place turrets on most surfaces, and that fires hit scans at enemies. The turrets have an 8-second cooldown, so if you put one down and it dies instantly, you can't put it down again. But as long as you're putting it down in a relatively safe space, you really shouldn't have to worry about the turrets being on cooldown. As for hit scans, that's different than projectiles because it will instantly damage your enemies like Tracer or Soldier or any of those type characters. It's very, very easy to get hits on. And the turrets will almost instantly lock on. I almost said instantly. They're not instant. They're very, very close to instant. There's a very tiny delay before the turret locks on and starts shooting, and it tracks you extremely well. As a matter of fact, I've never really seen the turret miss in any circumstance. So as soon as you get line of sight of the turret, it's going to start shooting at you. Each turret has 3 levels. You can have level 1, 2, and 3 turrets. They will deal 14 damage per shot or per rocket at all levels. Now, the level 3 turret will occasionally fire rockets, but building your turret up from level 1 to level 2 does not increase its damage, rather it's just going to increase the rate of fire, which we'll talk about in a little bit. However, on console, I want to let you know that Torb turrets deal a little bit less damage. Instead of 14, they're dealing 10 damage per shot or rocket as well, because console players are not able to aim quite as precisely without a mouse. Believe me, I play a lot of console. I play a lot of Call of Duty and other games, so I know that's not true for everybody, and I'm not trying to bash on console players, but it's just easier to pick off Torb turrets on PC with Soldier and Widowmaker and Hanzo, whereas it's more challenging on console, and Torb was kind of like a little god, so they decided to nerf him a little bit. And even though on PC it'll deal 14 damage per shot, it doesn't seem like very much, but it just constantly goes. That's a constantly pumping out 14 damage per shot. Shoots pretty quickly, especially at level 2. And it never reloads, it never cools down, and it never stops. So you do wear people down over time. The maximum lock-on range is 40 meters. There is a range at which the Torb turrets will not hit you. However, most of the engagements and most of the places that people put up Torb turrets will be well within that range, and 40 meters is not an insignificant distance at all. It is actually quite a significant distance. So just assume if you can see a Torbjorn turret, it's going to be shooting at you. So let's talk about the turret health per level. Level 1 only has 150 hit points, making it roughly the same health as Tracer. Level 2 will double that, up to 300 hit points, kinda closer to Reaper, maybe Reaper plus a little bit of armor. And if you use your ultimate and go into Molten Core, you get a colossal 800 hit points on these turrets, giving them maybe the same effective health as D.Va, given the fact that she has a lot of armor. And they are very, very tanky and very, very difficult to kill. When it comes to the rate of fire per level, it follows a similar pattern. You get 120 rounds per minute at level 1, you get 240 rounds per minute at level 2, roughly doubling. However, at level 3 you only get a minor gain at 300 rounds per minute. It'll shoot a little bit faster, but not tremendously faster. However, level 3 turrets will fire rockets too. Now, that makes a big difference because they have splash damage and it adds a little bit of extra DPS. Turrets can't headshot though. A Torbjorn turret will never headshot you. It just doesn't aim at that part of your body ever, so there's pretty much no way for it to headshot and deal extra damage, so you don't have to worry about that. Whew, that's a lot of stats, but we aren't quite done yet. Molten Core is Torbjorn's ultimate, and it is nasty. As a matter of fact, in my experience, at least playing against Torbjorn's, it's one of the most frustrating ultimates in the game, because Molten Core is a self-boost that grants you a beefy level 3 turret. As long as your turret is level 2, it'll automatically be upgraded to level 3. You get 50% attack speed on your primary, your shotgun, and on your hammer, which should not be underestimated. It immediately gives you 300 armor, which allows you to heal yourself and survive a lot of incoming damage, and it has a surprisingly long 12-second duration. A lot of people underestimate Torbjorn or kind of consider him a joke and not very serious. However, once Torbjorn ults, everybody on the map craps their pants because they know that's a very, very serious thing. If you stack this along with Ana's nano boost, it can be ridiculous because you get more attack speed and more damage, and you can just hammer people into oblivion or shotgun them into oblivion. It's kind of a fun tactic, maybe not the best, but it can do some serious work. Just make it a point to never underestimate the power of Molten Core, because Torb is a dwarven god in that form. So that was a whole lot of stats about Torbjorn, quite a few things that I didn't know before researching this, and now hopefully I've imparted some knowledge onto you. So I'm going to give some general recommendations and suggestions. I'll save the bigger strategical parts of the Torbjorn guide for its own guide on how to place turrets and how to play them. But generally speaking, Torbjorn is best off near his turret and firing the Rivet gun to charge the ultimate. I don't find him to be very useful sitting directly behind the turret so that he can heal it really fast. Oftentimes you just take damage and die very quickly. It can be useful depending on who's shooting at you and how much DPS and how much healing you have and stuff like that, but you're usually better off just somewhere in the vicinity of the turret instead of directly behind it. You constantly want to be firing your regular gun just because it increases your DPS output and you'll charge your ult faster. Torbjorn is all about his ultimate. You want to charge that up super duper fast and get it going because a Molten Core Torbjorn can turn around any sort of defensive team fight. His Rivet Shotgun is also a major deterrent to anybody that wants to dive him. You would think it would be very easy for Winston to dive in and just murder Torbjorn, or for D.Va or Roadhog or something like that. However, the Rivet Shotgun kind of neutralizes a lot of them. It makes them very difficult to get in, so typically longer range characters are better against little Torb. As I said in the beginning, a good Torb keeps his team well armored. The armor is almost as significant as the turret, to be honest with you. A Symmetra with armor that can survive longer and laser people. A Roadhog that has some armor. Most importantly, a Mercy, a Lucio, a ZENYATTA, an Ana, any of those that have armor that can survive being dived by Genji or Reaper or any of these very assassin-heavy type characters is just a tremendous boost to your team. It helps keep your team alive and is very, very important. And finally, please don't play attack Torbjorn. He's terrible on attack. Yes, I know some people can do it. Yes, I know it's theoretically possible. Yes, I know that one match you did it worked fine, and your best friend Dave only plays attack Torb, but he's really not designed for that. Torb is truly a defense-only kind of hero, and I think that he excels in that role, and he's really god-awful on offense. When it comes to counter picks, Torbjorn is strong against ZENYATTA, Genji, Winston, and Lucio. Lucio typically can't deal enough damage to kill the turrets. Winston gets murdered by the shotgun and the turrets chew him up a little bit. Genji has a difficult time actually bursting down the turrets, and the turrets don't deal enough damage for his reflect to often cause them to kill themselves. ZENYATTA just has issues trading, however if the turret's looking at somebody else, he can take it down pretty quickly. Torbjorn is weak against Pharah. Now that's a good Pharah. An idiotic Pharah will ignore your turret and get murdered in the air, but a good one can cut it down very quickly. Soldier cuts it very quickly. Widowmaker, Hanzo, Junkrat, almost anybody with very long range burst damage will do very good against Torb. And guys, that is all for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.